In English is Roman Roland. That's it. Roman Roland. And when I came to Canada, this is my baby. I read that when I was 18. I read it when I was 25. When I came to Canada about 30, the first thing I looked around was Roman Roland works. Classic books, Emil Zola, Maxim Gorky, Tolstoy. Because I thought I read them in Farsi, and if I read them in English, that will help to improve my English. Thank you. My English. Is that yours? Living here? Okay. So, when I looked for it in the bookstore, nobody knew who is Roman Roland. That broke my heart. The book was translated to 12 languages, but when I was researching for it to talk about it today, I learned it was 27 languages that they translated his work. And he got Nobel Prize, and I talk about it when I talk about his biography. But a few months ago, I found this, a brand new Roman Roland. In today's life, they are learning that classic literature was old. Some people ask me, how did you write the first novel and you got to be the first or shortlisted and be so successful? Just reading classic. That's the only help. I started to read since I was 17, 18, and never stopped. So there is a stamp of him, if you want to know how famous the guy was. Russian made it, French copied right after it, and a few other countries in Europe, they made a stamp of Mr. Roland. So he was famous enough. So I was introduced to Roman Roland works in my early youth. However, I have never put down his books and his encouraging ideas. He said, "It is the artist's business to create sunshine when the sun fails." Throughout my adult life, I have witnessed the failure of our shining intelligence. With our wars, devastation, and displacement of people all around our world, it seems we have not learned from our history. The works of Roman Roland highlighted the concept of his time, and through his fiction, non-fiction, and theater, he depicted the ugly faces of war and cheering enthusiasts who blindly followed orders. He was born in 1866 in Clemency and passed in 1944 in Vasley, both in France. He was novelist, essayist, art historian, and mystic. Roland was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1950 as a tribute to the lofty idealism of his literary production and to the sympathy and love of truth with which he has described different types of beautiful human beings in his art. One of the most famous book I ever taught in any literary community is this, Jean Christophe. This book alone translated to 25 languages. He studied philosophy, but his independence of spirit led him to abandon that so as not to submit to a dominant ideology. He received his degree in history in 1889. Then in 1895, he received his doctoral degree with his thesis, The Origins of Modern Lyric Theatre. He taught at various schools in Paris before directing a newly established music school known as the School of Advanced Social Study from 1902 to 1911. In 1903, he was appointed to the first chair of music history at the Sorbonne University. His first book was published in 1902 when he was 36 years old. Through his advocacy for people's theater, he made a significant contribution toward the democratization of the theater. As a humanist and demanding yet tamed young man, he did not like teaching. He was not indifferent to youth. Jean-Christophe, Oliver, and their friends, the hero of his novel, they all were young.
but with real-life persons, youth as well as adult, Roland maintained only a distance relationship. He was first and foremost a writer. Assured that literature would provide him with a modest income, he resigned from the university in 1912. Romain Rolland was lifelong peace lover. He was one of the few major French writers to retain his pacifist internationalist value during the World War I and II, and he moved to Switzerland to protest that war by writing Hudud de la Mesure in 1915, published as Above the Battle in Chicago, 1916. In 1928, Rolland, an Hungarian scholar, philosopher, and natural living experimenter, Edmond Boudreau-Zegli, founded the International Biogenetic Society to promote and expand on their ideas of integration of mind, body, and spirit. In 1932, Roland was among the first members of the World Committee Against War and Fascism, organized by Willy Musenberg. Also, Roland considered Maxim Gorky, my other hero, the greatest man of his time. Roland served unofficially as ambassador for French artists to the Soviet Union. However, as a pacifist, he was uncomfortable with Stalin's brutal repression of the opposition during the Victor Serge's imprisonment. However, Roland agreed to handle the publication of Serge's writing in France despite their political disagreement. In 1937, he came back to live in Vasily, which in 1940 was occupied by Germans. During the occupation, he isolated himself in complete solitude and never stopped his work. In 1940, he finished his memoirs. He also placed the finishing touches on his musical research on the life of Ludwig van Beethoven. Shortly before his death, he wrote Pejvack, 1944, in which he examines religion and socialism through the context of his memories. He died on December 30 in Vasily, 1944. His novels are the most famous novel, 10 volumes of Jean Christophe, again, is this one. I have it all in one book, which bring together his interests and ideas in the story of a German musical genius who makes France his second home and became a vehicle for Roland's views in music, social matter, and understanding between nations. His other novels are Kolakos Bouvenu, 1990. These are not translated to English, I couldn't find them. I read them in Farsi though. Kalabangu, 1920. Pierre de Louis, 1920, and another very famous one that has been translated to about 20 languages is The Enchanted Soul. Jean-Christophe is the life of a young man from the day he was born and the circumstances that he grew into it and became who he was. The Enchanted Soul is the life of a woman, and he wrote it so beautifully. Academic career, he became a history teacher, then professor of the history of the music at Sorbonne University, and the history professor at the École Normale Supérieure. That's all about him, and of course, I can talk about him for days. I will have a few of his quotes, my favorite. One makes mistakes, that is life, but it's never a mistake to have loved. Another thing I learned about him that Romain Rolland was vegetarian. He says thousands of animals, today billions of animals, are butchered every day without a shadow of remorse. It cries of vegans upon all human races. I couldn't believe it when I read that. I said, oh, those days they were vegetarian people. And the last one, you desire a popular art? Begin by having a people whose minds are liberated, a people not crushed by misery and continental labor, not brutalized by by every superstitious and every fanaticism, a people of itself, and a victor in the fight that is being waged today. This is my Roman. Of course, I cannot read the book. There is no way. 1,000, which part I pick, which chapter I pick. I did my best to remember a few part of beautiful things that he wrote about human, a person, in the changes that happened to them in life. Jean-Christophe was in a kind of tight situation and he had to pull himself out. And he did. Here how he described it. I just read one page of this and a couple of pages of his non-fiction, then we can talk about it. Free. He felt that he was free. Free of others and of himself. The network of passion in which he had been enmeshed for more than a year had suddenly been burst asunder. How? He did not know. The filaments and given before the growth of his being. It was one of those crises of growth in which robust natures tears away the dead casting of year that is past. The old soul in which they are cramped and stifled. Christopher breathed deeply, without understanding what had happened. An icy whirlwind was rushing through the great gate of the town as he returned from taking Godfrey on his way. The people were walking, his head lowered against the stone. Girls going to their work were struggling against the wind that blew against their skirts. They stopped every now and then to breathe, with their nose and cheeks red, and they looked exasperated, and as thought they wanted to cry, as though they wanted to cry. He thought of that other tormented days through which he had passed. He looked at the wintry sky, the town covered with snow, the people struggling along and passing. He looked about him, into himself. He was no longer bound. He was alone. Alone. How happy to be alone. To be his own. What a joy to have escaped from his bonds, from his torturing memories, from the hallucination of faces that he loved or detested. What a joy at last to live without being the prey of life, to have become his own master. He went home, white with the snow. He shook himself gaily like a dog as he passed his mother, who was sweeping the passage. He lifted her up, giving little inarticulate cries of affection, such as one makes to a tiny child. Poor old Louisa struggled in her son's arm. She was wet with the melting snow, and she called him with a jolly laugh, "You great, great Gabby." He went up to his room, 3 steps at a time. He could hardly see himself in his little mirror. It was so dark, but his heart was glad. His room was low and narrow, and it was difficult to move in it, but it was like a kingdom to him. He locked the door and laughed with pleasure. He goes more and more to talk about his solitude and why he was happy to be free from that.